The morning sun cast long shadows across Fort Carson's elite marksmanship training facility as a dusty pickup truck pulled into the visitor parking area. The engine coughed twice before settling into silence, and from the driver's seat stepped a woman who looked like she'd driven straight from a county fair rather than reporting to one of the Army's most prestigious sniper schools. Sarah Chen wore faded jeans, scuffed boots, and a flannel shirt that had seen better decades. Her black hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she carried herself with the unhurried gait of someone who had nowhere urgent to be. Slung over her shoulder was a rifle case, bright pink camouflage that seemed to glow against the military gray of the surrounding buildings. The case caught the attention of two Marines smoking near the entrance. Corporal Jake Martinez nudged his partner and snorted, "Check it out, Rodriguez. Barbie's going hunting." Staff Sergeant Tony Rodriguez looked up from his phone and nearly choked on his coffee. "Jesus, is that thing real? Looks like someone bedazzled a rifle case." Sarah walked past them without acknowledgement, her pale green eyes taking in every detail of the facility. The precision-cut grass, the regulation spacing of buildings, the way junior enlisted personnel automatically straightened when senior NCOs passed. She'd seen it all before, in different uniforms, under different flags, in places where the stakes were measured in lives rather than training scores. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to Military and Veteran Stories so you never miss these true tales of courage. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? At the main reception desk, a young specialist looked up from his paperwork as Sarah approached. His nameplate read Chen, no relation, despite the shared surname. He glanced at her civilian clothes, then at the pink rifle case, and his professional smile wavered slightly. "Can I help you, ma'am?" he asked, his tone walking the line between helpful and skeptical. "Sarah Chen," she replied quietly, sliding a set of orders across the counter. "Reporting for the Advanced Precision Marksman course." Specialist Chen scanned the paperwork, his eyebrows rising slightly. The orders were legitimate, routed through proper channels, but something about them felt sanitized. No unit designation, no prior duty stations, just a name and a course assignment that had appeared on his roster 3 days ago. "Ma'am, this is a military course," he said carefully. "Are you sure you're in the right place? The civilian hunter safety classes are held over at I'm sure," Sarah interrupted gently. Her voice carried no irritation, just quiet certainty. He typed her information into the system, pausing when additional details populated the screen. Clearance level, TS, SCI. Previous training, classified. Current assignment, classified. The kind of redactions that made a junior enlisted soldier stop, asking questions. "Okay, ma'am," he said, his demeanor shifting slightly. "You'll be with Alpha Company. Sergeant Major Williams is the course commander. Building C, range complex behind the headquarters." Sarah nodded her thanks and headed toward the designated building. Behind her, Specialist Chen stared at his computer screen, wondering what kind of civilian needed that level of security clearance, and why she was carrying what looked like a child's toy rifle to one of the most elite marksmanship schools in the world. The range complex sprawled across the Colorado landscape like a small city dedicated to the art of precision shooting. Multiple firing lines stretched into the distance, backstopped by hills that had absorbed millions of rounds over the decades. The air smelled of gunpowder, cleaning solvents, and the crisp mountain breeze that made long-distance shooting both challenging and addictive. Sarah found Building C without difficulty. Through the windows, she could see a classroom filled with soldiers in various uniforms, Army, Marines, Air Force, even a few Navy personnel. All men, all clearly experienced shooters based on their bearing and the casual way they handled their equipment. She paused outside the door, listening to the conversation within. "Heard they're letting civilians into the course now," someone was saying. "Budget cuts, probably. Need to fill seats." "Great," another voice replied. "Next thing you know, they'll be letting mall cops and security guards try for sniper tabs." Laughter rippled through the room. Sarah recognized the sound. Not malicious, just the casual confidence of professionals who'd earned their place and couldn't imagine anyone else belonging. She pushed open the door and stepped inside. 23 pairs of eyes turned toward her, taking in her civilian clothes and the impossible-to-ignore pink rifle case. The conversation died instantly. "Lost?" asked a staff sergeant with Ranger tabs, his tone not unkind, but clearly assuming she'd taken a wrong turn. "Sarah Chen," she said simply. "Advanced Precision Marksman Course." The silence stretched uncomfortably. A few soldiers exchanged glances. Someone in the back row whispered something that sounded like, "Seriously?" Master Sergeant Frank Williams stood at the front of the classroom. A weathered man in his late 40s who'd been teaching marksmanship longer than some of his students had been alive. He consulted his roster, found her name, and nodded slowly. "Miss Chen," he said, "welcome to APMC. Take a seat wherever you can find one." The only empty chair was in the front row, directly under the instructor's gaze. Sarah settled into it, setting her rifle case on the floor beside her. The pink camouflage pattern seemed even more garish under the fluorescent lights. Captain Michael Torres, a Marine sniper instructor, leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. He'd been teaching precision shooting for 8 years and had never seen anything quite like this. "Ma'am," he said, curiosity getting the better of his judgment, "that's an interesting choice of equipment case." "It was a gift," Sarah replied evenly. "From who? Your daughter?" Someone called out from the back. More chuckles. Sarah turned slightly, her green eyes finding the speaker, a cocky-looking army sergeant with airborne wings. "My spotter," she said. "Before he died." The laughter died instantly. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Master Sergeant Williams cleared his throat. "All right, settle down. Let's talk about what you're here to learn." For the next hour, Williams outlined the course curriculum: advanced ballistics, wind reading, range estimation, environmental factors, shooting at distances from 800 to 1,200 meters, with precision requirements that separated elite marksmen from merely good ones. Throughout the briefing, Sarah sat silently, taking no notes, asking no questions. When Williams mentioned the qualification, standards, hitting 80% of targets at varying distances, she didn't react. When he described the final test, 50 consecutive hits at 1,000 meters, her expression remained unchanged. "Any questions?" Williams asked as the briefing concluded. A Marine gunnery sergeant raised his hand. "Sergeant Major, what's the record for this course?" Williams smiled. "Gunnery Sergeant Patricia Hayes, Marines, 2019. 47 consecutive hits at 1,000 meters before she missed." "Hell of a shooter." "What about distance records?" asked another student. "Different game," Williams replied. "Confirmed kill record in combat is 2,475 meters. But that's not what we're teaching here. We focus on precision and consistency at combat-relevant ranges." Sarah's head tilted slightly at the mention of the distance record, but she said nothing. As the class filed out to the equipment shed, the whispered conversations began in earnest. "No way she makes it past day 3, predicted Staff Sergeant Mike Cameron, an Army sniper with 2 combat deployments. "This isn't a hobby course." "Did you see that rifle case?" asked Sergeant First Class David Park. "I'm surprised it doesn't have unicorns on it." Captain Torres fell into step beside Master Sergeant Williams. "Frank, what's the story with the civilian? Her paperwork looks hinky." Williams shrugged. "Orders came from way up. Sometimes we get CIA, sometimes contractors, sometimes people we're not supposed to ask about. As long as she can shoot and doesn't slow down the rest of the class, I don't care if she shows up in a tutu." But privately, Williams was curious too. In 30 years of teaching, he'd learned to spot shooters. Something about their eyes, the way they carried themselves, how they observed their environment. Sarah Chen had all those markers, which made her appearance all the more puzzling. Why would someone with obvious experience choose to look like an amateur? The equipment shed smelled like gun oil and canvas. Rows of precision rifles lined the walls, military-issue M40s, M107s, and various match-grade weapons that represented the cutting edge of long-distance lethality. Students were selecting their training weapons under the watchful eye of the armorer, Sergeant First Class Janet Cooper. Sarah approached the counter with her pink case in hand. "Ma'am," Cooper said diplomatically, "we have plenty of rifles available. These are precision instruments, properly zeroed and maintained. You might find them more suitable for the course requirements." "I appreciate that," Sarah replied, unzipping her case, "but I prefer to use my own." The weapon that emerged from the pink case was not what anyone expected. The rifle itself was a work of art. A custom-built, .300 Winchester Magnum with a match-grade barrel, precision machined action, and a scope that cost more than most soldiers made in a month. Every surface had been carefully refinished in the same pink camouflage pattern as the case. But, underneath the unconventional paint job, was a weapon that screamed professional quality. Cooper's expert eye took in the details. The hand-fitted stock, the custom trigger group, the way every component had been precisely assembled. This wasn't a novelty weapon. This was a tool built for serious work. "Ma'am," she said slowly, "who did the work on this rifle?" "I did," Sarah answered, running her fingers along the stock with obvious familiarity. "Took about 6 months to get everything exactly right." Staff Sergeant Cameron wandered over, drawn by curiosity. When he saw the rifle, his mocking smile faded. "Holy shit," he muttered. "That's a surgeon action, isn't it? And that's a Night Force scope." Sarah nodded. 5.5 22x56 with the Moa reticle. The action is hand-lapped, and the barrel is a Krieger match grade. The technical specifications rolled off her tongue with casual expertise. Cameron blinked, recalibrating his assessment. Those components represented tens of thousands of dollars and extensive knowledge of precision rifle building. "Why pink?" he asked, unable to help himself. Sarah's expression softened slightly. "My spotter's daughter, she was 8 when he deployed, told him pink was her favorite color and that it would keep him safe because no one would expect a sniper to use a pink rifle." She paused. She was right about the last part. The shed had grown quiet. Other students were listening now, trying to reconcile the woman in front of them with the obviously professional equipment she carried. Master Sergeant Williams approached, drawn by the crowd. When he saw the rifle, his eyebrows rose. "Miss Chen, that's quite a weapon. Mind if I ask where you learned to build precision rifles?" "Here and there," Sarah said evasively. "Trial and error. Mostly." Williams examined the rifle more closely. The stock showed wear patterns that spoke of extensive use. Not range time, but field work. Real work. The kind of wear that came from crawling through mud, lying in hide sites, and taking shots that mattered. "What kind of work do you do, ma'am?" he asked quietly. "Problem solving," Sarah replied with a slight smile that didn't reach her eyes. On the firing line, the initial incredulity began to shift toward curiosity. Students watched as Sarah set up her shooting position with movements that were economical, practiced, and completely professional. She built her shooting mat and bipod placement with the kind of efficiency that only came from doing it hundreds of times under pressure. The first exercise was basic, shooting at 300 meters to confirm rifle zeros. Nothing challenging for anyone who'd made it into the course. Sarah loaded a single round, settled into her position, and took the shot. No dramatic preparation, no elaborate breathing routine, just the smooth sequence of a practiced marksman. The target monitor showed a perfect center hit. "Good start," Williams called out. Second shot. Another round. Another perfect center hit. By the 5th shot, people were paying attention. By the 10th, the side conversations had stopped entirely. "Ma'am," called Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez, the Marine instructor, "you mind if we check your scope settings?" Just to verify your zero is accurate. Sarah looked up from her rifle. Of course. Rodriguez examined the scope, noting the precise click adjustments. Everything was exactly where it should be for 300-meter shooting. No luck, no accident. Just proper preparation and execution. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "what's your background with precision shooting?" Sarah considered the question for a moment. "Mostly self-taught," she said finally. "I read a lot." It was technically true. She had read extensively about ballistics, wind reading, and environmental factors. She'd just done most of that reading in classified technical manuals during advanced training courses that officially didn't exist. As the day progressed, Sarah's shooting remained flawless. 300 meters, 500 meters, 800 meters. Every shot found its mark with mechanical precision. She didn't boast, didn't comment on other students' performance, didn't seek attention. She simply executed each shot with the calm efficiency of someone for whom precision was as natural as breathing. By the end of the first day, the jokes about her pink rifle had stopped entirely. Students who'd initially dismissed her as an out-of-place amateur were now stealing glances at her targets, trying to understand how someone so unassuming could shoot with such devastating accuracy. Captain Torres pulled Williams aside after the range closed. "Frank, I've been teaching this course for 8 years. I've seen CIA, Delta, SEALs, Recon Marines. She shoots like someone who's been doing this professionally for a very long time." Williams nodded grimly. "I know. Question is, professionally doing what?" As students cleaned their weapons and prepared to leave, Sarah disassembled her rifle with the same methodical precision she'd shown all day. Each component was cleaned, inspected, and carefully stowed in its designated place within the pink case. Sergeant First Class Park approached hesitantly. "Ma'am, I wanted to apologize for the comments earlier about the rifle case." Sarah looked up, her expression neutral, but not unkind. "No offense taken, Sergeant. I know how it looks. Can I ask why you keep it that way? The pink, I mean. You obviously know what you're doing. You could have any case you wanted." Sarah closed the case carefully, running her hand over the bright camouflage pattern. "Because every time someone underestimates me, because of how things look on the surface, I remember that appearances can be the most dangerous assumptions we make about people." She slung the case over her shoulder and walked toward the parking lot, leaving Park standing there with the growing suspicion that there was much more to Sarah Chen than met the eye. As her pickup truck disappeared down the road, the remaining students shared the same unspoken question. Who was this woman? And why was someone with her obvious skills pretending to be something she clearly wasn't? The answer would have surprised them all. Sarah Chen was indeed pretending, but not in the way they imagined. She wasn't pretending to be competent. She was pretending to be just another student when, in reality, she was one of the deadliest precision shooters alive, someone whose official existence had been erased from every database and whose pink rifle had a confirmed kill count that would make most snipers envious. But tomorrow would bring new challenges, and eventually, the truth about Sarah Chen would become impossible to hide. Day 3 of the Advanced Precision Marksman course dawned gray and windy, with gusts that would challenge even experienced shooters. The students gathered at the 1,000-meter range, where Master Sergeant Williams stood beside a collection of targets that looked impossibly small in the distance. "Today we separate the wheat from the chaff," Williams announced, his voice carrying over the whistling wind. 1,000-meter shooting in variable conditions. Wind is gusting 15 to 25 miles per hour, shifting directions every few minutes. Your job is to read it, compensate for it, and still put rounds on target. Sarah set up her position on firing point 7, methodically arranging her equipment while other students struggled with the challenging conditions. The windsock at the 500-meter mark whipped back and forth like a weather vane gone mad, and mirage shimmer made range estimation nearly impossible. Staff Sergeant Cameron, positioned 2 lanes over, fired his first shot and swore softly as his round impacted a full meter left of target. "This is impossible," he muttered. Winds changing every 30 seconds. Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez, serving as one of the range instructors, moved behind the firing line with practiced eyes. He paused at side Sarah's position, watching as she made minute adjustments to her scope elevation and windage. Her calculations seemed effortless, as if she were reading the wind like a familiar language. "First shot when ready," Williams called out. Sarah's rifle cracked, the sound sharp and clean. Downrange, the target monitor flashed green, dead center hit. "Good shooting. Lane 7, Williams said, though his tone carried a note of surprise. In 30 years of teaching, he'd rarely seen anyone nail their first shot in conditions this challenging. The exercise continued. Other students struggled, their shots scattered by the unpredictable wind. Even experienced snipers were having difficulty, adjusting their holds constantly as the conditions shifted. Sarah fired her second shot. Another center hit, third shot, center, fourth shot, center. By the 10th consecutive hit, the other shooters had stopped focusing on their own targets. Conversations died as attention shifted to the woman with the pink rifle who seemed immune to conditions that were humbling everyone else. "Ma'am," called Captain Torres from the instructor's line. "What's your wind call?" Sarah didn't look up from her scope. "Variable 8 to 12 miles per hour, predominantly from the northwest, but shifting to due north in approximately 30 seconds. Torres checked his handheld weather station, then looked at the wind flags downrange. The woman was predicting wind changes with an accuracy that bordered on supernatural. 20 shots, 20 hits. Master Sergeant Williams approached Sarah's position, kneeling beside her shooting mat. "Miss Chen, in 30 years of teaching this course, I've seen maybe 5 people shoot like this in these conditions. Mind sharing your secret?" Sarah adjusted her cheek weld slightly, never taking her eye off the scope. "You learn to read the land, not just the wind flags," she said quietly. "The way grass moves, how dust behaves, the sound the wind makes when it hits, different obstacles. Everything tells a story if you know how to listen." "Where did you learn to read wind like that?" Williams asked. "Afghanistan," Sarah replied without thinking, then stopped herself. I studied videos from Afghanistan. Online training materials." But Williams caught the slip. He'd spent 3 tours in Afghanistan himself, and he knew the difference between someone who'd studied it and someone who'd lived it. 30 shots. 30 hits. The range had grown quiet except for the sound of wind and the occasional crack of Sarah's rifle. Other students had abandoned their own shooting to watch what was becoming an exhibition rather than a training exercise. "Ma'am," called Sergeant First Class Park, "what's the farthest shot you've ever made?" Sarah paused, her finger resting lightly on the trigger. The question brought back memories she'd buried deep. A valley in the Hindu Kush, targets that moved like ghosts through morning mist, shots that had to be perfect because lives hung in the balance. "Far enough," she said finally, and fired her 31st shot. Another perfect hit. It was then that the emergency call came over Williams' radio. "Range control to APMC. We have a situation developing. Stand by for priority traffic." Williams keyed his radio. "APMC standing by." "Roger, APMC. We have reports of an active shooter situation at the Mountain View Elementary School in Woodland Park. Local law enforcement is requesting immediate sniper support. School is approximately 4,000 meters northeast of your current position, direct line of sight from Range Hill." Williams felt the blood drain from his face. Mountain View Elementary was where many of the base personnel sent their children. His own granddaughter attended 2nd grade there. "Range control, what's the tactical situation?" he asked, his voice steady despite the churning in his stomach. "Suspect is a former military member, possibly suffering from PTSD episode. He's barricaded in the school gymnasium with an unknown number of hostages. Local SWAT is en route, but won't arrive for 20 minutes. Suspect has already fired warning shots. Time is critical." The students around the firing line had gone completely silent, listening to the radio traffic with growing horror. 4,000 meters was an extreme distance. Beyond the range of most police sharpshooters, beyond what most military snipers would consider a viable shot. Captain Torres stepped forward. "Sergeant Major, I can make the shot." 4,000 meters is pushing it, but with the right equipment. "Negative," Williams interrupted, scanning the range through binoculars. "Angle's wrong from here. We'd need to move to Range Hill. And even then..." He paused, calculating. "Wind conditions are brutal. I've seen maybe 3 people in my career who could make that shot in these conditions." "Sir," interrupted a voice behind them. It was Sarah, who had risen from her shooting position. "I can make the shot." Every head turned toward her. The woman who'd been dismissed as an amateur 3 days ago was volunteering for one of the most difficult precision shots imaginable, with children's lives hanging in the balance. Staff Sergeant Cameron laughed nervously. "Ma'am, with all due respect, this isn't a training exercise. That's a 4,000-meter shot in shifting winds with hostages downrange. Even if you are a good shot, I can make the shot," Sarah repeated, her voice calm but carrying an undertone of absolute certainty that made Cameron's protests die in his throat. Williams studied her face, seeing something in her pale green eyes that he'd missed before. The quiet confidence wasn't arrogance, it was the settled calm of someone who'd been in similar situations and knew exactly what she was capable of. "Ma'am," he said carefully, 4,000 meters is beyond the effective range of most sniper rifles. The ballistic drop alone, 18.6 inches. With my load," Sarah interrupted. "Wind drift will vary between 8 and 15 inches depending on the gusts. Time of flight approximately 4.8 seconds. I'll need a spotter with precise range and wind calls." The technical precision of her answer stunned Williams into silence. Those weren't calculations someone could make on the fly. They came from deep familiarity with ballistics at extreme range. Williams' radio crackled again. "APMC, be advised, the suspect has moved to the gymnasium windows. We have visual confirmation of hostages. Looks like a classroom of children, possibly 20 to 25 kids. Suspect appears to be becoming increasingly agitated." The urgency in the dispatcher's voice cut through any remaining debate. Children were in immediate danger, and conventional help was still 20 minutes away. Sarah was already moving, breaking down her shooting position with practiced efficiency. "I need transportation to Range Hill, a spotter with range-finding equipment and clear radio communication with the tactical commander on scene." "Ma'am," Williams said, his professional caution warring with growing desperation. "If you miss, I won't miss," Sarah said simply. The words carried absolute conviction. Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez stepped forward. "I'll spot for her," he said. "If she can make the shot, I can give her the numbers she needs." Williams looked from Sarah to the radio in his hand, thinking of his granddaughter and all the other children whose lives hung in the balance. Military protocol said to wait for official sniper support. Human instinct said to trust the woman who just demonstrated impossible accuracy under challenging conditions. He made his decision. "Rodriguez, get the range truck. Torres, grab the high-power spotting scope and laser rangefinder. Chen, you're about to take the most important shot of your life." As the team raced toward Range Hill, Sarah felt the familiar calm settling over her. The pink rifle case bounced in the back of the truck, and she could almost hear the voice of her former spotter. A Marine sergeant named Mike Harrison, who died in Syria 2 years ago, whose 8-year-old daughter had insisted on painting the rifle case pink because it was her favorite color. "Gonna be a tough one, Ghost," she whispered, using the call sign she'd carried for 7 years in places that officially didn't exist. "But those kids need us to be perfect." Range Hill offered a commanding view of the valley below, and through the powerful spotting scope, the Mountain View Elementary School was clearly visible 4,000 meters away. The single-story building sat like a toy model in the distance, its gymnasium windows glinting in the gray afternoon light. Sarah set up her shooting position with movements that had become second nature over years of similar setups in far more dangerous places. Every motion was economical, precise, designed to create the most stable platform possible for an impossible shot. Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez settled beside her with the spotting scope, his experienced eyes taking in details that would escape most observers. "Jesus," he muttered, adjusting the scope's focus. "I can see movement in the windows. Looks like kids sitting on the gymnasium floor." Williams coordinated with the tactical commander through his radio. "Woodpecker Base. This is range control. We have overwatch position established. What's your current status?" The response crackled through static. "Range control. Suspect is visible in the northwest window of the gymnasium. Adult male, appears to be armed with a rifle. Hostages are grouped in the center of the room, approximately 15 meters from his position. Local SWAT is still 12 minutes out. Suspect is becoming increasingly agitated, making demands we can't meet." Sarah adjusted her rifle's bipod, settling into the shooting position she'd used in a dozen countries under conditions that ranged from 12, scorching desert heat to Arctic cold. The familiar weight of the pink rifle felt like an extension of her own body. "Range to target?" she asked Rodriguez. He worked the laser rangefinder, taking multiple readings to account for the sloped terrain. 4,016 meters, confirmed. Wind flags show variable conditions, but I'm reading sustained 15 miles per hour from the northwest, gusting to 25. Sarah made adjustments to her scope, her fingers moving across the turrets with practiced precision. The calculations were complex. Not just for distance and wind, but for the Coriolis effect at extreme range, the air density at Colorado's altitude, even the slight drift caused by the Earth's rotation during the bullet's 4-second flight time. Staff Sergeant Cameron, who had insisted on coming despite his earlier skepticism, watched through binoculars as Sarah prepared. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I've been a sniper for 8 years, and I've never seen anyone set up for a shot like this. The adjustments you're making, where did you learn to calculate all that?" "Experience," Sarah replied, not taking her eye from the scope. Through the powerful optics, she could see the suspect clearly, a man in his 30s, wearing military-style clothing, pacing back and forth near the windows with erratic movements that suggested severe mental distress. Behind him, barely visible, she could make out small figures sitting in a tight group. Children, probably second and third graders, scared and confused, but trying to stay quiet like their teacher had undoubtedly told them to do. "Ghost, I need wind calls every 30 seconds, Sarah said to Rodriguez, using the tactical language that had become instinctive over years of operations. "And I need constant updates on target movement patterns." Rodriguez blinked at the call sign, but didn't question it. In crisis situations, formalities fell away in favor of efficiency. "Copy, Ghost. Current wind is 15 miles per hour, northwest, steady. Target is moving in a pattern, 3 steps left, pause, 6 steps right, pause, back to center. Cycle time, approximately 90 seconds. Williams monitored the radio traffic, his face grim. "Woodpecker Base, what's the hostage status?" "Range control. Suspect just fired a warning shot into the ceiling. Children are becoming more distressed. Our negotiator is trying to establish dialogue, but suspect isn't responding coherently. We need a solution fast." Sarah had gone completely still behind her rifle, her breathing slow and controlled. At 4,000 meters, every tiny movement was magnified exponentially. A heartbeat could throw off the shot. A slight tremor in her hands could mean the difference between precision and catastrophe. "Target movement?" she asked quietly. 3 steps left. "Now moving right," Rodriguez called. Speed is consistent, but he's stopping at irregular intervals. Through her scope, Sarah watched the suspect's pattern, timing his movements, looking for the moment when he would be positioned away from the hostages with a clear field of fire. At this distance, there was no margin for error. The shot had to be perfect. "Wind holding steady, 15 northwest," Rodriguez reported. I'm seeing some gusting at the 2,000-meter mark, but it should settle by the time your round gets downrange. Captain Torres, monitoring the situation through his own spotting scope, found himself studying Sarah's shooting position. Everything about her setup screamed advanced training. The way she'd built her bipod placement, the precise adjustment of her shooting sling, even the specific cant she'd applied to the rifle to account for the sloped terrain. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "I've trained with some elite units. Delta, SEAL Team 6, Marine Force Recon. Your technique, it's not standard military. Where did you learn to shoot like this?" Sarah's finger found the trigger, applying just enough pressure to take up the slack. "Places that don't exist," she said quietly. "Programs that were never officially approved. Operations that never happened." The radio crackled with increasing urgency. "Range control. Suspect is becoming more volatile. He just grabbed one of the children. Repeat, he has a hostage in his immediate vicinity. Our window is closing fast." Williams felt sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool mountain air. "Ghost, what's your status?" "I have the shot," Sarah replied, her voice absolutely calm. "But I need the suspect to move away from the hostages. Current position puts civilians at risk." Rodriguez adjusted his spotting scope, studying the scene with professional intensity. Target is holding a female child, approximately 7 years old. She's between him and your line of fire. For a moment, the hilltop was silent except for the sound of wind through the pines. Sarah controlled her breathing, each cycle bringing her deeper into the zone where precision lived, a mental state she'd learned to access in places like Kandahar and Mosul, where American lives depended on impossible accuracy. "Wait," Rodriguez said suddenly. "Target is moving. He's releasing the child. She's moving back toward the group. Target is clear. Target is clear." "Wind?" Sarah asked. 18 miles per hour, northwest, gusting to 22. But there's a lull coming. Steady. 15 and 10 seconds. Mark. Sarah felt time slow down the way it always did in these moments. Years of training, dozens of combat deployments, hundreds of lives saved through precision fire, it all crystallized into this single moment. Her finger pressed the trigger with surgical control. The pink rifle bucked against her shoulder, the custom muzzle brake directing gases away from her field of view. The .300 Winchester Magnum round left the barrel at 2,950 feet per second, beginning its long arc toward a target so distant it was barely visible to the naked eye. For 4.8 seconds, everyone on Range Hill held their breath. Then Rodriguez's voice cut through the silence. "Hit. Center mass. Target is down. Target is down." The radio exploded with chatter from the tactical commander. "Range control. Suspect is neutralized. Repeat, suspect is down. Children are safe." Outstanding shooting. How the hell did someone make that shot? Williams grabbed his radio. "Woodpecker Base, glad to help. Our shooter sends her regards." As the immediate crisis passed, the full magnitude of what had just happened began to sink in. Sarah had made one of the longest precision shots in law enforcement history. In challenging wind conditions, with innocent lives at stake, and she'd done it with a pink rifle that everyone had initially dismissed as a joke. Staff Sergeant Cameron was staring at Sarah with something approaching awe. "Ma'am, that shot. That was beyond military precision. That was something else entirely." Captain Torres lowered his binoculars, his expression troubled. "Ghost. That's not a nickname, is it? That's an operational call sign." Sarah was breaking down her shooting position, her movements still calm and professional despite what she'd just accomplished. She corrected quietly. Past tense. Rodriguez studied her through narrowed eyes. "Ma'am, I've worked with recon snipers who couldn't make that shot. What unit were you with?" Sarah paused in her equipment breakdown, considering how much truth she could safely reveal. "The kind that doesn't appear on organizational charts," she said finally. The kind where your service record gets classified and your real name disappears from databases. Williams felt pieces of a puzzle clicking together. Miss Chen, when you said you were self-taught. I am Sarah Chen, she interrupted. That part's true. Everything else. She gestured vaguely. Everything else is complicated. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your hoped support means everything and helps me bring you more inspiring military stories like this one. As they loaded the equipment back into the truck, the radio brought news that the children were all safe, unharmed, and being reunited with their families. The suspect, it turned out, was a veteran suffering from severe PTSD who would now get the help he needed instead of facing a tragedy that would have destroyed dozens of lives. But on Range Hill, a different kind of recognition was beginning. The students, who had initially mocked Sarah's pink rifle, were looking at her with new understanding. This wasn't just someone who could shoot well. This was someone who had operated at the highest levels of precision warfare, someone whose very existence had been classified for reasons they were only beginning to guess at. Ma'am, Williams said as they drove back to the range, I think it's time we had a conversation about who you really are. Sarah looked out the window at the mountains, thinking of the children who were going home to their families that night because of a shot made with a pink rifle that carried the memory of another child who would never come home from war. That, she said quietly, is going to require a higher security clearance than any of you have. The conference room in the range headquarters building had never felt smaller. Sarah sat at one end of the table, her pink rifle case propped against the wall behind her like a colorful exclamation point in the sterile military environment. Across from her, Master Sergeant Williams, Captain Torres, and Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez waited with expressions that mixed curiosity, suspicion, and growing respect. Williams had made a phone call immediately after the successful shot, reaching out to contacts in the intelligence community who might shed light on Sarah Chen's true identity. The response had been immediate and unambiguous. That conversation requires a skiff and people with SCI clearances. Stand by for DOD, a visit from some very serious people. Now, 3 hours later, those serious people had arrived. Colonel Janet Mitchell, Army Intelligence, entered the room with the bearing of someone accustomed to dealing with secrets that could reshape geopolitical landscapes. Behind her came a man in an expensive suit who introduced himself only as Mr. Johnson and carried credentials that suggested affiliations with organizations that preferred to remain unnamed. Gentlemen, Colonel Mitchell said, settling into a chair, what you witnessed today was a demonstration of capabilities that are classified at the highest levels. Miss Chen, or rather, the person you know as Miss Chen, has agreed to a limited disclosure for the purposes of this debrief. Williams leaned forward. Ma'am, my students deserve to understand what they've been witnessing. That shot today was well within her documented capabilities, Johnson interrupted. The individual you know as Sarah Chen holds the confirmed record for the longest precision shot in U.S. military history, 3,540 meters, confirmed kill. Helmand Province, Afghanistan, 2019. Among other accomplishments. Rodriguez felt his blood pressure spike. Sir, the record I know about is 2,475 meters. That's what's publicly acknowledged. That's what's publicly acknowledgeable, Colonel Mitchell corrected. There's a significant difference. Sarah spoke for the first time since the officials had arrived. Show them the file, Colonel. They've earned the right to know. Mitchell consulted her tablet, then looked around the room. What I'm about to share is classified secret, no foreign. It does not leave this room. She paused. The person you know as Sarah Chen is actually Sergeant Major Elena Vasquez, formerly of the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. Call sign, Ghost. The silence in the room was deafening. Torres was the first to find his voice. Delta Force? But why the cover identity? Why pretend to be a civilian? Johnson answered. Sergeant Major Vasquez was declared KIA 18 months ago during a classified operation in Syria. For her safety and for operational security reasons, that fiction had to be maintained. But she's sitting right here, Cameron said, confusion evident in his voice. Yes, Mitchell replied. Which presents certain complications. Sarah looked around the table at faces she'd come to respect over the past 3 days. The operation in Syria went sideways. My entire team was killed, and I was listed as KIA to protect me from retaliation by the people we'd been targeting. Sarah Chen became my new identity. A civilian with an interest in precision shooting, looking for a quiet place to disappear. Williams rubbed his temples. So when you showed up at my course, I was trying to fade into the background, Sarah said. Take the course. Demonstrate average skills. Maybe get a job as a civilian marksmanship instructor somewhere quiet. I never intended to reveal my dog capabilities. The pink rifle, Rodriguez said suddenly. That wasn't a joke. That was operational camouflage. Sarah nodded. Mike Harrison, my spotter in Delta, had an 8-year-old daughter named Katie. She insisted on painting my rifle case pink because she said it was her favorite color and it would keep her daddy safe. Her voice caught slightly. Mike died in Syria. I kept the pink paint because it reminds me why precision matters. Captain Torres studied the file that Mitchell had placed on the table. Ma'am, according to this, you have 67 confirmed kills, including several at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. You've been awarded the Silver Star, Bronze Star with V device, and, he paused. This can't be right. The Congressional Medal of Honor? Classified citation, Johnson said. The details of that action will remain classified for the foreseeable future. Sarah shifted uncomfortably. The medal doesn't matter. What matters is that today, children went home to their families because this team worked together to solve a problem. Williams was studying her personnel file with the intensity of a man rewriting his understanding of reality. Sergeant Major, your service record. Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Somalia, 12 deployments over 15 years. Training at every advanced marksmanship school in the U.S. military, plus exchanges with British SAS, Canadian JTF-2, and Australian SASR. The pink rifle makes sense now, Cameron said suddenly. You weren't hiding your skills to be modest. You were hiding them to survive. Partly, Sarah admitted. But also, because I was tired of being a weapon. I wanted to be a teacher, someone who could pass on what I'd learned without the weight of classified operations and body counts. Rodriguez leaned back in his chair. Ma'am, why reveal yourself now? Why blow your cover to make that shot? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Because 25 children were in danger, and I was the only one present who could help them. Some things are more important than staying hidden. Colonel Mitchell closed the file. Which brings us to the current situation. Sergeant Major Vasquez's cover identity has been compromised. The shot she made today will be investigated, analyzed, and discussed. Maintaining the Sarah Chen fiction is no longer viable. So what happens now? Williams asked. Johnson answered. Sergeant Major Vasquez has several options. She can accept a new identity and relocate again. She can return to active duty with Delta Force, or, he paused, she can accept a position as a senior instructor at the U.S. Army Sniper School, where her skills and experience would benefit the next generation of precision marksmen. Sarah looked around the table at the faces of men who had gone from mocking her pink rifle to understanding that they'd been in the presence of one of the most lethal precision shooters in military history. I'd like to teach, she said quietly. But not as Sergeant Major Vasquez. Too much baggage, too many classified operations. I'd like to teach as Sarah Chen, a former military member with extensive experience who believes that precision matters because lives matter. Williams smiled. Ma'am, I think we can arrange that, but I have one condition. "Sir? Keep the pink rifle. My students need to learn that the most dangerous assumptions are the ones we make about people based on appearances." Sarah laughed. The first genuinely relaxed sound she'd made since arriving at the course. "Deal. But you should know, the pink isn't just about appearances anymore. It's about remembering that every shot we take carries someone's hopes with it. Mike Harrison's daughter. Those children today. They deserve our best, regardless of what color the rifle is." As the meeting concluded and the officials departed, the original course members remained in the room with Sarah. The woman they'd initially dismissed as an amateur was revealed to be one of the most accomplished marksmen in military history, someone whose pink rifle had saved American lives in a dozen countries and whose reluctant revelation had saved children's lives that very day. But perhaps most importantly, she was someone who had chosen to use her lethal skills to teach others how to protect rather than destroy, to build up rather than tear down. The pink rifle, once a source of mockery, had become a symbol of something deeper. The idea that strength didn't always look the way people expected, and that the most powerful weapons were often carried by those humble enough to let others underestimate them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new students, and new opportunities to pass on the lessons learned in places where precision meant the difference between coming home and being mourned. But tonight, children slept safely in their beds because a woman with a pink rifle had been willing to reveal who she really was when it mattered most. The next morning at Fort Carson's advanced precision marksman course felt different. Word had spread through the base's informal communication network. The kind of whispered conversations that happened in mess halls, motor pools, and barracks rooms when something extraordinary disrupted the normal routine of military life. Sarah arrived at the usual time, her pink rifle case slung over her shoulder, but now every eye that fell on her carried a different weight. The maintenance crew working on vehicles near the parking area straightened unconsciously as she passed. Two MPs at the gate entrance stood a little taller when they saw her approaching. Inside the range building, the atmosphere was electric with unspoken tension. The same students who had mocked her appearance 3 days earlier now watched her movements with the careful attention reserved for someone whose capabilities had been fundamentally reassessed. Master Sergeant Williams called the formation to attention as Sarah entered the classroom. For the first time since the course began, absolute silence fell instantly. No shuffling feet, no whispered jokes, no casual disregard for military courtesy. "Ladies and gentlemen," Williams announced, his voice carrying formal weight. "Yesterday's events have necessitated some changes to our course structure. I want to be clear about something from the start." He turned to face Sarah directly. "The individual you know as Sarah Chen is, in fact, a decorated combat veteran whose service record includes achievements that represent the highest standards of precision marksmanship in modern military history." Staff Sergeant Cameron, who had made numerous jokes about the pink rifle over the past few days, felt his face burning with embarrassment and something deeper, the recognition that he'd been in the presence of greatness and had been too blind to see it. Williams continued, "Yesterday's successful resolution of the hostage crisis was accomplished through a precision shot that will be studied in sniper schools for decades to come. 4,016 meters, variable wind conditions, with innocent lives at stake." He paused, scanning the room. "How many of you could make that shot?" Silence. "How many of you would even attempt it?" More silence, heavy with the weight of honest self-assessment. Then, from the back of the room, Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez stood up. His movement was deliberate, formal, carrying the kind of intent that transformed a simple gesture into something significant. "Ma'am," he said, his voice steady and strong, "it has been an honor to serve as your spotter." His right hand came up in a sharp, precise salute, not the casual acknowledgement of rank that happened dozens of times daily in military life, but the kind of salute reserved for moments when respect transcended protocol. The effect was immediate and profound. Staff Sergeant Cameron was on his feet next, his own hand rising to his forehead with military precision. "Ma'am," he said, his voice thick with emotion, I apologize for my comments about your equipment. I should have known better. One by one, every student in the classroom stood. Captain Torres, his Marine bearing straight and proud. Sergeant First Class Park, his previous skepticism replaced by obvious admiration. Even the youngest soldiers, who barely understood the full significance of what they were witnessing, knew they were participating in something important. 23 salutes held steady in the fluorescent-lit classroom, the sound of boots snapping together, echoing like thunder. Sarah felt something break inside her chest, not breaking apart, but breaking open. For 18 months, she had carried the weight of a false death, the isolation of a manufactured identity, the burden of skills she couldn't acknowledge. Now, standing before these men who had gone from mockery to respect through the simple revelation of truth, she felt something she hadn't experienced since Syria: acceptance. She returned their salutes with the same precision she brought to everything else, but her pale green eyes glistened with moisture she couldn't entirely suppress. "Thank you," she said quietly. "All of you." The salutes held for another heartbeat before Williams called the room to order. But something fundamental had shifted. The pink rifle case that had been a source of amusement was now treated with the reverence due to a weapon that had saved American lives in a dozen countries and had prevented tragedy just yesterday. As the formal instruction resumed, Sarah noticed the subtle changes in how people interacted with her. Questions were asked with genuine interest rather than condescension. When she demonstrated shooting techniques, students paid attention with the intensity of people learning from a master craftsman. The casual dismissal was gone, replaced by the kind of focused respect that true professionals showed for excellence. But the most profound change was in how Sarah carried herself. The careful anonymity was gone, replaced by the quiet confidence of someone who no longer had to pretend to be less than she was. 3 hours after the morning formation, a black SUV with government plates pulled up to the range headquarters. From it emerged a figure that made Master Sergeant Williams' blood pressure spike. Brigadier General Robert Hayes, commander of the Army's Special Operations Training Command. General Hayes was not a man who made casual visits to training facilities. His presence meant either someone was in serious trouble or something significant was about to happen. Given the events of the previous day, Williams suspected both possibilities might be true. The general's aide, a crisp lieutenant colonel, entered the building first. "Master Sergeant Williams?" General Hayes requests an immediate meeting with the individual known as Sarah Chen. Williams felt his stomach drop. "Sir, is there a problem?" "On the contrary," the aide replied. "The general has some things he'd like to discuss regarding yesterday's incident." Sarah was called in from the range, where she'd been working with students on wind reading techniques. She entered the conference room still wearing her civilian clothes, the pink rifle case slung across her shoulder. General Hayes stood as she entered, a gesture of respect that surprised everyone present. "Sergeant Major Vasquez," the general said, using her real name and rank. "Please, have a seat." Sarah settled into a chair across from him, her expression calm but alert. She'd been in enough high-level meetings to recognize the signs of a conversation that could change everything. "Yesterday's incident has created what you might call a situation," General Hayes began. "The shot you made is already being analyzed by ballistics experts, military historians, and foreign intelligence services who monitor our capabilities. The precision demonstrated, combined with the tactical decision-making under pressure, represents a level of skill that we frankly don't want our adversaries to fully understand." Williams, who had been invited to remain for the meeting, felt confusion creeping in. "Sir, I don't understand the problem." General Hayes turned to him. "The problem, Sergeant Major, is that officially, the person who made that shot doesn't exist. Elena Vasquez died in Syria 18 months ago. Her capabilities, her training, her very existence has been classified and compartmentalized for operational security reasons." Sarah spoke for the first time. "Sir, if my presence here is compromising operational security, it's not." Hayes interrupted. "In fact, it's created an opportunity we hadn't anticipated." He opened a file folder and slid several documents across the table. The Army's sniper school has been requesting permission to declassify certain advanced techniques for incorporation into our training programs. Yesterday's demonstration has given us the justification we need to move forward with those plans. Sarah scanned the documents, recognizing the outlines of training methodologies she'd helped develop during her years with Delta Force. Sir, these techniques were classified because they revealed sources and methods. Were classified, Hayes emphasized. Past tense. The threat environment has evolved, and frankly, we need to share these capabilities more broadly if we're going to maintain our edge. He leaned forward, his expression serious. I'm offering you a position as the senior instructor at the U.S. Army Sniper School. Full colonel rank, your choice of duty station, and the authority to implement training programs based on your operational experience. The offer hung in the air like a precision shot, clean and decisive. Williams couldn't hide his surprise. Sir, that would represent one of the fastest promotions in recent military history. Sergeant Major Vasquez's contributions to national security over the past 15 years justify exceptional recognition, Hayes replied. Moreover, her demonstrated teaching ability and tactical judgment make her uniquely qualified for this position. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, considering the implications. Accepting meant leaving the anonymity she'd fought to preserve. It meant stepping back into the world of classified operations and high-stakes decisions. But it also meant the opportunity to pass on knowledge that could save American lives for generations to come. Sir, she said finally, I have two conditions. Hayes raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. First, I want to maintain the Sarah Chen identity for routine interactions. Elena Vasquez carries too much classified baggage for a teaching environment. Agreed, Hayes said immediately. Second, I want to keep the pink rifle as part of my standard equipment. Students need to understand that effectiveness doesn't always look the way they expect. For the first time since entering the room, General Hayes smiled. Sergeant Major, I think that rifle has become one of our most effective recruiting tools. Every military blogger and social media account is talking about the mysterious woman with the pink rifle who made an impossible shot. Recruitment applications for sniper training have increased 30% since yesterday. Williams shook his head in amazement. Sir, 3 days ago, my students were laughing at that rifle case. And now, Hayes replied, it represents something they aspire to achieve. The ability to perform when it matters most, regardless of what anyone thinks about your equipment or appearance. Sarah stood and extended her hand to the general. Sir, I accept your offer. When do I start? Immediately, Hayes replied, shaking her hand firmly. Your first class reports Monday morning. I understand you already have some experience with the Advanced Precision Marksman course curriculum. As the meeting concluded and General Hayes departed, Williams found himself alone with Sarah in the conference room. The woman who had arrived 3 days ago as a mysterious civilian was now revealed to be a decorated combat veteran about to become one of the most senior instructors in the military sniper training program. Ma'am, he said, using the formal address her new rank would require, I owe you an apology. When you first arrived, I thought you were just another person looking for an easy credential. Sarah smiled, the first genuinely relaxed expression he'd seen from her since the shooting incident. Master Sergeant, you did exactly what a good instructor should do. You evaluated performance, not preconceptions. When the situation demanded it, you trusted capability over appearance. She picked up her pink rifle case, running her hand over the bright camouflage pattern. Besides, you weren't wrong to be skeptical. A woman in civilian clothes with a pink rifle case doesn't look like a traditional sniper. That's exactly why it works. Williams considered this. Ma'am, can I ask you something? Of course. Yesterday, when you made that shot, were you confident you could make it, or were you hoping? Sarah's expression grew serious. Master Sergeant, in 15 years of combat operations, I learned that confidence is a luxury you can't afford when lives are at stake. I knew I could make the shot because I've made harder ones. But more importantly, I knew that if I didn't try, those children would die. Sometimes, hoping isn't enough. Sometimes, you have to be certain. As they left the conference room together, Williams realized that the past 3 days had taught him as much as any formal training he'd ever received. He'd learned that the most dangerous assumptions were often the ones that seemed most reasonable, that excellence could wear any disguise, and that true professionals recognized capability regardless of how it was packaged. The pink rifle had become more than just an unconventional weapon. It had become a symbol of the speed idea that effectiveness transcended expectations, that precision could emerge from the most unlikely sources, and that the deadliest opponents were often the ones you never saw coming. 6 months later, the U.S. Army Sniper School at Fort Benning looked like a different institution. The changes weren't immediately obvious to casual observers. The same buildings, the same ranges, the same basic curriculum that had trained elite marksmen for decades. But for those who understood the nuances of advanced military training, the transformation was profound. Colonel Sarah Chen, she had chosen to use her cover identity as her official name, had implemented training methodologies that bridged the gap between classroom theory and battlefield reality. Her courses incorporated environmental factors that most sniper schools treated as advanced topics: urban shooting through glass, shots over water where mirage could deceive even experienced marksmen, and precision fire in extreme weather, conditions that would have been considered impossible just a year earlier. The pink rifle had become legendary within military circles. It sat in a place of honor in the school's museum, surrounded by placards detailing not just its technical specifications, but its operational history. Students would pause there during tours, reading about shots made in places they couldn't pronounce, distances that challenged their understanding of physics, and missions that officially never happened. But the weapon's real legacy lived in the classroom, where Colonel Chen used it to teach lessons that went far beyond marksmanship. The first rule of precision shooting, she would tell new classes, is that your equipment doesn't determine your capability. Your training does. Your judgment does. Your commitment to excellence does. She would gesture toward the pink rifle. This weapon has saved American lives in 12 countries. It has prevented terrorist attacks, eliminated high-value targets, and, yesterday it helped one of your classmates make a qualifying shot he didn't think he could achieve. Not because it's magical, but because the person behind it refused to accept limitations. Master Sergeant Williams, who had been promoted and assigned as the school's senior enlisted advisor, often observed these classes. He never tired of watching students' expressions change as they realized that the woman with the unconventional rifle case possessed knowledge that could fundamentally improve their chances of survival and mission success. "Ma'am," a young Marine corporal had asked during one recent class, "how do you know when you're ready to take a shot that really matters?" Colonel Chen had considered the question carefully. "You're ready when you understand that the shot isn't about you," she'd replied. "It's about the people counting on you to be perfect when perfection is the only option that matters. When you can hold that responsibility without being crushed by it, you're ready." The curriculum changes she'd implemented were being adopted by allied sniper schools around the world. British SAS instructors visited regularly to observe her teaching methods. Canadian JTF-2 had requested permission to send their advanced students for training. Even Israeli special forces, renowned for their own precision shooting capabilities, had acknowledged that the techniques being taught at Fort Benning represented a new standard of excellence. But perhaps the most significant change was cultural. The school had always trained competent marksmen, but Colonel Chen had introduced something different. The concept that true precision required humility, that the deadliest snipers were often those who looked least dangerous, and that underestimation could be the most powerful weapon in a marksman's arsenal. "Never let anyone see all of what you're capable of," she would tell advanced students. "Reserve your best performance for when lives depend on it. Let them discover your true skill only when it's too late for them to counter it." The lesson was reinforced every time a student made a shot they hadn't thought possible. Every time someone overcame their preconceptions about equipment or techniques, every time excellence emerged from an unexpected source. Staff Sergeant Cameron, who had been among the most skeptical of students in that first advanced precision marksman course, had become one of Colonel Chen's most effective instructors. He specialized in teaching students to overcome mental barriers that limited their performance. 6 months ago, he would tell his classes, "I made the mistake of judging capability by appearance. I learned that the most dangerous assumptions are often the most reasonable seeming ones. Don't make the same mistake. Evaluate performance, not packaging." The story of the hostage crisis at Mountain View Elementary had become part of the school's oral tradition. New students would hear about the 4,000-meter shot made with a pink rifle in challenging conditions, about the children who went home safely because someone was willing to attempt the impossible, about the moment when hidden excellence revealed itself when it mattered most. But the story always concluded with the same lesson: that precision without purpose was merely technical skill, while precision, in service of protecting others, was something approaching art. Colonel Chen's office overlooked the main rifle range, where students practiced the fundamentals that would serve them in places where mistakes carried permanent consequences. On her desk sat a photograph, a young girl with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile, holding a paintbrush dripping with pink paint. The daughter of Sergeant Mike Harrison, the spotter who had died in Syria, the child whose favorite color had become a symbol of something larger than itself. Next to the photograph was a letter that arrived each month from a teacher at Mountain View Elementary School, updating Colonel Chen on the progress of the 25 children whose lives had been saved by a shot fired from a pink rifle on a gray Colorado afternoon. They were thriving, learning, growing into the people they were meant to become because someone had been willing to reveal her true capabilities when revelation carried risk. The afternoon sun slanted through the office windows as Colonel Chen prepared for her next class. Advanced students who thought they understood the limits of precision shooting and were about to discover they were wrong. She picked up the pink rifle case, running her fingers over the familiar camouflage pattern that had once been a source of mockery and had become a symbol of the idea that excellence could emerge from anywhere, anytime, carried by anyone humble enough to let others underestimate them. Outside, students gathered on the firing line, preparing for lessons that would challenge everything they thought they knew about precision, capability, and the distance between good enough and perfect. The pink rifle was ready to teach them that sometimes the most powerful weapons were carried by those who looked least dangerous, and that true precision began not with perfect equipment, but with the perfect understanding that some shots couldn't be missed because lives depended on them. In the distance, targets waited at impossible ranges, ready to separate those who merely hoped from those who could deliver when delivery was the only option that mattered. The legend of the pink rifle continued, not in museums or textbooks, but in the minds and hearts of those who learned that excellence transcended expectations, that precision could emerge from humility, and that the deadliest opponents were often the ones you never saw coming until it was too late to matter. 1 year after the Mountain View Elementary incident, Colonel Sarah Chen received an invitation that made her smile in a way that had nothing to do with military protocol. 25 children wanted to meet the woman with the pink rifle who had kept them safe. She arrived at the school on a sunny Tuesday morning, carrying the now famous rifle case that had been featured in military journals, documentary films, and recruitment videos around the world. But for the children waiting in the gymnasium where she had once fired an impossible shot, it was simply the rifle that had brought them home to their families. 8-year-old Emma Rodriguez, the little girl who had been held by the gunman, stepped forward with a handmade card. "Thank you for saving us," she said with the simple directness of childhood. "I told my mom that pink is the best color for rifles because it means someone cares enough to be different." Colonel Chen knelt down to Emma's eye level, accepting the card with hands that had once trembled from nerve damage and now held steady through choice and discipline. "Pink is a good color," she agreed. "But the most important thing isn't the color of the rifle, it's the heart of the person holding it." As she spoke to the children about courage, precision, and the importance of helping others when they needed it most, Colonel Chen realized that the greatest shot she'd ever made wasn't measured in meters or recorded in official records. It was measured in smiles, in futures preserved, in the simple fact that 25 children could grow up to become whatever they chose to be because someone had been willing to reveal the truth about herself when truth was the only thing that mattered. The pink rifle had taught them all that the most powerful weapons were carried by those who understood that strength came not from intimidation, but from service, that precision mattered most when lives hung in the balance, and that sometimes the most important shot you could take was the one that saved someone else's tomorrow. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe for more military and veteran stories. These true tales keep the courage alive for generations to come. And in the comments, tell us where you're watching from and who's the quiet leader you'll never forget.